She stood alone in the grand hall of Ashworth Manor, surrounded by 300 guests, and realized she had married a man who could not bear to look at her. The candlelight caught the diamonds at her throat, the silk of her ivory gown, the careful arrangement of her dark hair. Every detail of the evening had been arranged to perfection, every detail except the groom. Alexander Ashworth, the Duke of Ravenscroft, stood across the room with his back turned to her, deep in conversation with Lord Whitmore. His broad shoulders were rigid beneath his black coat. His hand held a glass of champagne he had not touched. He had not spoken to his bride in over an hour. Not since the ceremony. Not since the moment he had placed the ring upon her finger with all the warmth of a man signing a death warrant. Eleanor watched him now, her heart a cold stone in her chest. She had known, of course. She had known from the beginning that this was a marriage of obligation, arranged by their fathers to settle an old debt and unite two struggling estates. She had known that the Duke did not love her, but she had hoped, foolishly, desperately, that in time he might learn to, that he might see her, that he might one day look at her the way other men looked at their wives. But he would not even look at her at all. "Your Grace," a soft voice at her elbow. Eleanor turned to find one of the maids, a young girl with wide, worried eyes. "The Dowager Duchess asks if you are well. She says you look pale." Eleanor forced a smile. It felt like glass breaking on her face. "Tell her I am perfectly well, only tired." The maid curtsied and vanished into the crowd. Eleanor turned back toward her husband. He had moved now, closer to the terrace doors, still speaking with Whitmore, still not looking for her, still not wondering where she was or how she felt or whether she was even still breathing. She had been waiting for love that would never come, and she knew, in that moment, that she would not wait any longer. The decision settled over her like a cold morning fog. She would not beg for his affection. She would not trail after him like a lost dog, hopping for scraps of attention. She would be his duchess in name. She would manage his household and fulfill her duties, but she would not love him. She would not give him her heart when he had made it so painfully clear he did not want it. Eleanor turned away from her husband and walked toward the terrace alone. The night air was cool against her heated skin. Below the stone balcony, the gardens of Ashworth Manor stretched out in moonlit silence, roses and hedges and winding paths all silvered by the stars. She gripped the railing and breathed deeply, trying to steady the trembling in her chest. She did not hear him approach. She only felt his presence, a sudden warmth at her back, the faint scent of sandalwood and rain. "You should be inside." His voice was low, clipped, as if speaking to her cost him something. "The guests will talk." Eleanor did not turn. "Let them talk. They have been talking all evening." A pause. She could feel his surprise at her tone, the way she did not immediately bend to his will. "It is our wedding night," he said. "Your absence will be noted." Now she did turn, slowly, lifting her chin to meet his gaze. In the moonlight his face was all sharp angles and shadows, his dark eyes unreadable. He was beautiful in the way a winter storm was beautiful, cold and terrible and impossible to touch. "Forgive me," she said quietly. "I did not think you would notice my absence. You have not noticed my presence all evening." Something flickered across his face, too quick to name, but he did not deny it. He did not offer excuses or apologies. He only stood there, looking at her as if she were a puzzle he had no interest in solving. "Come inside," he said at last. "It is late." Eleanor held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once and walked past him into the house. She did not look back. The first month of their marriage was a study in silence. Alexander left for London 3 days after the wedding, summoned by business he did not explain. Eleanor remained at Ashworth Manor, learning the rhythms of the great house, meeting the servants, familiarizing herself with the accounts and the kitchens and the endless corridors that all seemed to lead back to emptiness. She wrote to him once, a brief letter informing him of household matters. He did not respond. She wrote again 2 weeks later to tell him that his favorite stallion had thrown a shoe and the farrier had been called. No response. By the 4th week, she stopped writing entirely. Instead, Alina turned her attention to the estate. She discovered that the village of Ravencroft had been suffering for years. The previous Duke, Alexander's father, had been a negligent landlord, more interested in gambling than in the welfare of his tenants. Rents had been raised unfairly. Roofs had gone unrepaired. Families had been turned out of homes their grandparents had built. Alina began to visit the village every morning. She spoke with the tenants, listened to their grievances, made careful notes in a small leather journal. She arranged for the worst of the roofs to be repaired. She dismissed the estate manager, a cruel and corrupt man named Mr. Thorne, and hired a younger, kinder steward who actually seemed to care about the people he served. The villagers were wary of her at first. She was the new Duchess, the stranger from the north, the woman who had married their duke in a cold, arranged marriage. But Alina did not try to win them over with grand gestures. She simply showed up, day after day, with her journal and her gentle questions and her quiet determination to make things better. Within weeks, the wariness began to fade. Within 2 months, the villagers greeted her by name. Within 3, they began to bring her their problems without hesitation, trusting her to help. It was the only thing that made the loneliness bearable. She still slept alone in the Duchess's chambers, a vast, elegant room that felt like a tomb. She still ate alone at the long dining table, served by silent footmen who did not meet her eyes. She still walked the corridors of Ashworth Manor at night, unable to sleep, her footsteps echoing off the walls. But during the day in the village she felt useful, she felt seen, she felt like someone who mattered. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Alina began to build a life that did not revolve around waiting for Alexander to love her. The first time Alexander saw her again, he did not recognize her. He had returned to Ashworth Manor after 4 months in London, arriving late in the evening when the house was quiet. He had expected to find his wife waiting for him, anxious and eager, ready to report on her doings in his absence. Instead, he found the house empty of her presence. Her chambers were dark. The servants informed him that her Grace had retired early, exhausted from her day in the village. The village? Alexander frowned. What business does she have in the village? The butler, a dignified man named Hargrave, inclined his head. Her Grace has been overseeing repairs to the tenant cottages, Your Grace. She dismissed Mr. Thorne and hired a new steward. She has also arranged for the village school to be reopened. Alexander stared at him. She dismissed Thorne. Yes, Your Grace. The tenants had many complaints against him. Her Grace investigated and found them justified. A strange emotion flickered through Alexander's chest. He could not quite name it. Irritation, perhaps, that his wife had taken such liberties without consulting him. But beneath the irritation was something else. Something that felt uncomfortably like surprise. She had no authority to dismiss my steward, he said slowly. Hargrave said nothing. His face remained carefully neutral. Alexander climbed the stairs to his chambers, his mind turning over this new information. He had expected his wife to be cowering in the house, miserable and alone. He had expected her to beg for his attention, to write him endless letters, to prove herself a burden he would have to manage. He had not expected her to turn his own estate upside down. The next morning he rose early and went down to breakfast, fully prepared to confront her about Thorne. But she was not at the table. The dining room was empty, her chair untouched. "Where is the Duchess?" he asked Hargrave. "Her Grace left for the village an hour ago, Your Grace." "At this hour?" "She goes every morning, Your Grace. She returns by noon." Alexander stood in the doorway, feeling unaccountably wrong-footed. He had prepared himself for a confrontation, and she had simply not been there. It was disorienting. He went to his study and attempted to work, but he could not concentrate. His thoughts kept drifting to his wife, to the changes she had made in his absence, to the fact that she had not written to him in over 2 months. He told himself he was relieved. A wife who did not demand his attention was a gift. She would not pester him with letters and tears and emotional scenes. She would not try to force intimacy he did not want to give. But he was not relieved. He was unsettled. At noon, he heard the front door open and close, heard light footsteps in the hall, heard her voice speaking quietly to Hargrave. Alexander rose from his desk and went to the doorway of his study. She was standing in the entrance hall, removing her gloves. She wore a simple gray dress, practical and unadorned, and her dark hair was pulled back in a simple knot. She looked tired but purposeful, her cheeks flushed from the cold. As he watched, she turned and saw him. Her expression did not change. There was no flash of joy, no desperate hope, no wounded longing. She simply inclined her head, polite and distant, as if he were a stranger passing in the street. "Your Grace," she said, "I did not know you had returned. I arrived last night. Forgive me, I was already abed." Her voice was calm, steady, completely without the desperate warmth he had expected. She turned to Hargrave. "Please have tea sent to the morning room, and ask Mrs. Gray to prepare a basket for the Miller family. Their youngest child is ill." Hargrave bowed and retreated. Eleanor turned back to Alexander, meeting his eyes with quiet composure. "Is there something you wish to discuss, Your Grace?" It was not a question, it was a challenge. Alexander felt his jaw tighten. "I understand you dismissed my steward." "I did. Without consulting me. You were in London. The situation required immediate action." "The situation?" Eleanor's expression did not flicker. Mr. Thorne was stealing from the estate. He was overcharging the tenants and pocketing the difference. He threatened a widow with eviction when she could not pay. I had him removed. Alexander stared at her. "You should have written to me." "I did write to you, Your Grace, 3 times. You did not respond." The words fell between them, like stones dropping into still water. Alexander felt heat rise in his face. "I was busy." "I assumed as much." Eleanor's voice was soft, but there was steel beneath it. "Which is why I handled the matter myself. If you wish to dispute my decision, I am happy to discuss it, but I will not apologize for protecting the people of this estate." She did not wait for his response. She turned and walked toward the morning room, her back straight, her head high. Alexander stood in the entrance hall, watching her go, and felt something he had not felt in years. He felt ashamed. The weeks that followed were a study in quiet warfare. Alexander did not apologize for his neglect. He did not acknowledge that she had been right. He retreated to his study and his estate business and his long rides across the moor, avoiding her as deliberately as he had before. But he could not avoid her entirely. She was everywhere in the house, her presence felt in every room. Fresh flowers on the tables, fires lit in the empty chambers, the scent of her perfume lingering in the corridors. And always her absence at meals. She did not seek him out. She did not ask him to dine with her. She did not inquire about his day or his business or his thoughts. She was perfectly, devastatingly polite. It was a different kind of torment than he had expected. He had wanted her to give him space. Instead, she had given him a void. One evening, Alexander found himself standing at the window of his study, watching Eleanor walk through the garden. She was speaking with the head gardener, a young man named Thomas, who was laughing at something she said. She laughed too, her face bright and unguarded. Alexander felt his chest tighten. He had never made her laugh, not once in the entire time he had known her. He watched as Thomas reached out and touched her arm, a casual, friendly gesture. Eleanor did not pull away. She smiled up at him, her eyes warm. Something hot and ugly rose in Alexander's throat. He turned away from the window, disgusted with himself. He had no right to feel jealousy. He had given her no reason to smile at him. He had given her no reason to want his company. But the jealousy was there, sharp and bitter, refusing to be ignored. That night, he dined with her for the first time since their wedding. Elinor looked up in surprise when he entered the dining room. "Your Grace, I did not expect you." "I live here," he said curtly, taking his seat at the head of the table. "Of course." She returned her attention to her soup. Silence stretched between them, heavy and strained. Alexander searched for something to say, some way to bridge the chasm he had created, but every word felt clumsy and inadequate. "I understand the village school has reopened," he said finally. "Yes, we have hired a young woman from the next county, Miss Thorne's cousin, actually." She glanced up, a small smile playing at her lips. "I thought it would be a kindness to the family." Alexander blinked. "You hired the cousin of the man you dismissed." "The man's crimes are not her fault. She is a good teacher. The children adore her." It was a level of thoughtfulness that stunned him. He had spent 4 months in London, dealing with his own business, and she had been here, rebuilding his estate piece by piece, even showing kindness to the family of a man who had betrayed them both. "I underestimated you," he said quietly. Elinor set down her spoon. "Yes," she said, "you did." The honesty in her voice cut through him like a blade. They finished the meal in silence, but something had shifted between them, some small crack in the ice that separated them. Alexander did not know if it was a beginning or an end. He only knew that he could not stop thinking about the way she had looked at him when she said, "Yes, you did." Lady Honoria Bramwell arrived at Ashworth Manor 3 weeks later, and everything changed. She was beautiful in a way that made Elinor feel invisible. Golden-haired and blue-eyed, with a laugh like silver bells, and a way of touching Alexander's arm that made Elinor's stomach turn. They had grown up together, Alexander and Honoria. Their families had neighboring estates in the north. There had been talk of a marriage between them once, years ago, before Honoria had married Lord Bramwell. Lord Bramwell was dead now, and Honoria had come to Ashworth Manor to mourn. Or so she claimed. Elinor watched them together at dinner, the easy intimacy of old friends, the shared jokes, the lingering glances. She watched Alexander lean toward Honoria, listening to her stories with an attention he had never given his own wife. And she felt something inside her crack. She had thought she had accepted her situation. She had thought she had made peace with her husband's indifference. But watching him with Honoria, she realized that he was not incapable of warmth. He simply did not feel it for her. That night, Elinor stood in her chambers, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She saw a woman who had tried desperately to be worthy of love, a woman who had managed an estate, helped the poor, and carried herself with dignity through months of loneliness. And none of it mattered, because she was not Honoria. The next morning, she found Alexander and Honoria breakfasting together in the morning room. Honoria was laughing at something he had said, her hand resting lightly on his sleeve. Elinor stood in the doorway, watching them, and made a decision. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady. "I trust you both slept well." Honoria looked up, her smile widening. "Elinor, do join us. Alexander was just telling me about the summer we spent in Bath. It was the most wonderful season. We were inseparable." Alexander's expression flickered, but he said nothing. Elinor smiled. It did not reach her eyes. "How lovely. I am sure the Duchess will enjoy hearing more stories of your youth together. If you will excuse me, I have duties in the village." She turned before either of them could respond and walked out of the house. The journey to the village was longer than usual. Elinor walked without seeing the path, her heart pounding in her ears. She had known, of course, that there had been other women in Alexander's life. She had not known that one of them would come to stay in her home and treat her husband as if he still belonged to her. But she would not make a scene. She would not give Honoria the satisfaction of seeing her wounded. She would simply do what she had done for months. She would focus on her duties. She would help the people who needed her. She would remind herself that she was more than Alexander's unwanted wife. She was Eleanor Ashworth, the Duchess of Ravencroft, and she would not be broken by a man who could not see her worth. As she reached the village, she heard a voice calling her name. "Your Grace." She turned to find a young man approaching on horseback. He was tall and fair-haired, with kind eyes and a warm smile. Eleanor recognized him immediately. "Mr. Ashworth," she said, surprised. "I thought you were in London." Christopher Ashworth, Alexander's younger brother, dismounted and walked toward her. He was the opposite of his brother in every way. Where Alexander was cold, Christopher was warm. Where Alexander was distant, Christopher was present. Where Alexander had never once made her feel welcome, Christopher had been her only friend in those early, terrible weeks of her marriage. "I returned this morning," he said. "I heard about your work in the village. I had to see it for myself." Eleanor felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. "It is nothing, only what should have been done long ago." Christopher shook his head. "It is not nothing. You have done more for this estate in 6 months than my father did in 20 years. He paused, studying her face. "You look tired, Eleanor. Are you well?" The use of her name, so familiar and easy, made her throat tight. She thought of Alexander, who had never once called her by her Christian name, who had never once asked if she was well. "I am fine," she said, "only busy." Christopher's eyes searched hers. "My brother has been neglecting you again." It was not a question. Eleanor looked away. "I do not wish to discuss your brother." "Of course." Christopher offered her his arm. "Then let us discuss the village instead. Show me what you have done." She took his arm, and they walked together through the streets of Ravencroft, past the repaired cottages and the reopened school, and the families who greeted her with genuine affection. And for the first time in weeks, Eleanor felt something loosen in her chest. She did not notice the shadow watching from the edge of the village. She did not see Alexander, who had followed her, who stood beneath the old oak tree with his hands clenched at his sides. She did not see the look on his face as he watched her walk with his brother, laughing at something Christopher said. She did not see the fear in his eyes. But it was there. The days that followed were different. Alexander did not spend his time with Honoria. He retreated to his study, emerging only for meals. But he was not absent. He was watching. He watched Eleanor as she moved through the house, graceful and composed, never raising her voice, never showing the slightest crack in her composure. He watched as she hosted dinners for the local gentry, charming them with her intelligence and warmth. He watched as she spoke with the servants, remembering their names, asking after their families. He watched her, and he began to realize something that shook him to his core. He had married a remarkable woman, and he had spent 6 months treating her as if she were invisible. The realization sat in his chest like a stone, growing heavier each day. He did not know what to do with it. He did not know how to apologize for months of neglect. He did not know how to become the husband she deserved. So he did nothing. And Eleanor continued to pull away from him, one small distance at a time. The first crack appeared on a Sunday afternoon. They were returning from church, walking through the garden with Honoria and Christopher. Honoria was describing a ball she had attended in London, her voice bright and animated. "Everyone was asking about you, Alexander," she said. "They all wanted to know when you would return to society, especially Lady Montague. She said she has not seen you since your wedding." Alexander stiffened. "I have no interest in society." "But surely you cannot stay cooped up in the country forever. You must come to London for the season. We could attend the theater together, as we used to." Eleanor, walking just behind them, felt something cold settle in her stomach. She said nothing, but her hands tightened on her prayer book. Christopher noticed. He moved closer to her, his shoulder brushing hers. "You should come to London as well, Eleanor," he said lightly. "I know my brother has no appreciation for the theater, but I certainly do. I would be honored to escort you." Elinor managed a smile. "That is kind of you, Christopher." Alexander heard the exchange. He heard his wife calling his brother by his Christian name. He heard the warmth in her voice when she spoke to him. He turned, and for the first time he looked directly at Elinor. She met his gaze without flinching. There was no anger in her eyes, no accusation, only a kind of weary resignation that was somehow worse. "I would not wish to impose," she said quietly, "but if you wish to go to London, Your Grace, I will not stop you." The implication was clear. She did not care where he went. She did not care if he left. She had stopped waiting for him to choose her. Alexander felt something crack in his chest. "Elinor," he said, and the sound of her name on his lips made her eyes widen. "I do not wish to go to London." The garden fell silent. Even Honoria stopped her chatter, looking between them with sharp interest. "But you just said," she began. "I said I have no interest in society." Alexander did not look at her. His eyes were fixed on his wife. "I have no desire to leave Ashworth Manor." Elinor held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once and turned toward the house. "Please excuse me," she said. "I find I am tired." She walked away, her back straight, her steps steady. Alexander watched her go and felt Christopher's eyes on him. "What was that?" Christopher asked quietly. "Nothing." It did not look like nothing. Alexander turned to face his brother. "Stay out of my marriage." Christopher's jaw tightened. "Someone needs to be in it. You certainly are not." The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. He opened his mouth to retort, but Christopher was already walking away. Only Honoria remained, watching him with an expression he could not read. "She has changed you," she said softly. "I did not expect that." Alexander said nothing, but he knew she was right. The breaking point came on a rainy night in late October. Elinor had spent the day in the village, helping the family whose youngest child had died of fever. The funeral was over, the grave filled, the family left to their grief. She had stayed with them through the worst of it, holding the mother's hand, whispering words of comfort. Now she stood in the garden, rain soaking her dress, unable to make herself go inside. She was so tired, tired of being strong, tired of holding everything together, tired of pretending she did not care. She did care. She cared so much it was killing her. She heard footsteps behind her and did not turn. She knew it was him. She had learned to feel his presence, even when she did not want to. "You should come inside," Alexander said. "You will catch your death." Elinor did not move. Perhaps that would be better. He was silent for a moment. Then she felt his hand on her arm, warm and solid. "Elinor." She turned to face him. In the rain his face was blurred, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. He looked younger somehow, less certain, more human. "Why do you care?" she asked. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You have never cared before." He flinched, but he did not look away. "I know." "You left me." The words spilled out of her, months of pain finally breaking through. "You left me alone in this house, in this marriage, and you did not even answer my letters. You did not look at me. You did not touch me. You made me feel like I was nothing." "Elinor." "I tried so hard." Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the rain. "I tried to be a good wife. I tried to make this house a home. I tried to make you see me. But you never once looked at me, not once." Alexander's hand tightened on her arm. His face was anguished. "I am sorry." "Sorry is not enough." She pulled away from him, stepping back into the rain. "I cannot do this anymore. I cannot keep waiting for you to love me. It is destroying me." "I do not want to destroy you." "Then what do you want?" Her voice cracked. "Because I do not know anymore. I do not know what you want from me." Alexander stood in the rain, looking at his wife, and realized he did not know the answer. He only knew that he did not want to lose her. I want, he said slowly, to start again. Eleanor stared at him. What? I want to start again. I want to be a better husband. I want to learn how to love you. His voice was rough, raw. I know I do not deserve the chance. I know I have hurt you, but I am asking anyway. The rain fell around them, cold and relentless. Eleanor shook her head. I do not know if I can trust you. I know. You will hurt me again. I will try not to. That is not enough. But Alexander stepped toward her, closing the distance between them. Eleanor, I know I have been a fool. I know I have wasted months that I can never get back. But I am standing here in the rain, asking you to give me another chance. Please. She looked at him, at the man she had married, at the stranger who was finally looking at her as if he truly saw her. And despite everything, despite the pain and the loneliness and the months of silence, she felt something stir in her chest. Hope. One chance, she whispered. You get one chance. Alexander closed his eyes, relief washing over his face. Thank you. Prove to me that you mean it. I will. He reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. I will spend the rest of my life proving it. The rain continued to fall, but Eleanor did not feel cold anymore. The healing was slow. There were no grand romantic gestures, no sudden declarations of undying love. Alexander did not transform overnight into a passionate and attentive husband. He still retreated to his study for hours. He still struggled to express his feelings. He still sometimes forgot to ask about her day. But he tried. He began to dine with her every evening. He asked about the village, about her projects, about the families she had come to know. He listened, truly listened, as she told him about the widow whose son had found work in the next county, about the school that needed new books, about the farmer whose harvest had been poor. He began to walk with her in the garden in the mornings, before the rest of the house was awake. They did not always talk. Sometimes they simply walked in companionable silence, their shoulders almost touching. And slowly, Eleanor began to see a different side of him. The quiet kindness beneath the cold exterior, the dry wit that emerged when he relaxed, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, as if he were seeing her for the first time. But she held back. She could not help it. She had been hurt too deeply to trust easily. Then came the day of the accident. It was a clear December morning when Christopher arrived at Ashworth Manor with an offer. There was a horse fair in the next county, and he wanted Eleanor to accompany him. She had not been away from the estate since her wedding, and the change of scenery might do her good. Alexander was in his study, but he heard the invitation through the open door. He heard Christopher's easy charm, the way his brother made Eleanor laugh. And something twisted in his chest. He was not invited. He was not part of their easy friendship. He was the distant husband, the cold duke, the man who had pushed his wife away for so long that she had found comfort elsewhere. When he came to dinner that evening, Christopher had already left for the fair. Eleanor was at the table, a book open beside her plate. "Your brother is kind," she said. "He has offered to take me to the horse fair next week." Alexander's fork paused over his plate. "I heard." "You object." He looked at her. "No, you should go. You deserve to enjoy yourself." Eleanor studied his face. "But you do not like it." "I did not say that." "You did not have to." She set down her fork. "Alexander, if you do not want me to go, tell me." He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I do not want you to go." "Why?" "Because I am selfish. Because I do not want my brother to be the one who makes you smile." He met her eyes, and she saw the vulnerability there, raw and unguarded. "Because I want to be the one who makes you smile, and I do not know how." Eleanor's breath caught. "Alexander, I know I have no right to feel this way. I know I pushed you away. I know Christopher was kind to you when I was not." He leaned forward, his hands gripping the table. "But I cannot stand the thought of another man making you happy, not when I have been such a fool." The confession hung between them, heavy and real. Alina reached across the table and took his hand. "Then come with me." He blinked. "What?" "Come with me to the horse fair. Christopher can make his own arrangements." A small smile played at her lips. "I would rather go with you." Alexander stared at her. "You would?" Yes, her fingers tightened around his. "I would." Something shifted in his expression. The cold facade cracked, and beneath it she saw the man she had always hoped he could be. The man who was afraid, uncertain, desperate to be better. The man who loved her. She saw it then clearly for the first time. He loved her, not in the way she had always dreamed, not with passion and poetry and grand gestures, but in his own quiet, broken way he loved her. And that was enough. That was everything. The horse fair was the beginning of something new. They traveled together in the carriage, sitting closer than necessary. Alexander pointed out landmarks along the way, telling her stories of his childhood, memories he had never shared with anyone. She told him about her own childhood, the cold, strict house where she had grown up, the mother who had died too young, the father who had never recovered. They talked for hours, losing track of time. And when they arrived at the fair, Alexander reached for her hand as they walked through the crowds. It was a small gesture, but Alina felt tears prickle behind her eyes. She had waited so long for him to reach for her. They wandered through the stalls, examining horses and laughing at a particularly stubborn pony who refused to be led. Alexander bought her a small silver brooch, a delicate thing shaped like a horse. She pinned it to her dress, and he smiled at her. "Beautiful," he said. She was not sure if he meant the brooch or her, but it did not matter. The look in his eyes was enough. They stayed until sunset, then began the journey home. In the carriage, Alina leaned against Alexander's shoulder, exhausted and happy. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For today, for trying, for being the man I always hoped you could be." She felt him tense, then relax. "I am not that man yet, but I am trying. That is all I ask." They rode in silence, the carriage swaying gently, and Alina allowed herself to hope. The storm came out of nowhere. One moment the sky was clear. The next it was black, and rain was lashing against the windows, and thunder was rolling across the hills. The carriage lurched violently. Alina cried out, grabbing for Alexander's arm. He caught her, pulling her close. "Hold on," he said. "We will be all right." But the road was slick, and the horses were spooked, and the carriage driver was struggling to control them. They swerved, skidded, and then with a terrible crash, the carriage tipped onto its side. Alina was thrown against the door. Pain shot through her head, her shoulder, her ribs. She heard Alexander shouting her name, but the sound seemed very far away. Then everything went dark. She woke in a bed she did not recognize, her head throbbing. For a moment, she did not know where she was or how she had gotten there. Then she saw him. Alexander was sitting in a chair beside the bed, his head bowed, his hands clasped tightly. He looked as if he had not slept in days. His clothes were rumpled, his hair disheveled, his face pale with exhaustion. "Alexander," her voice was a cracked whisper. His head snapped up. The look on his face when he saw her was something Alina would never forget. It was raw, naked relief, so powerful it took her breath away. "Alina," he was on his feet, crossing to the bed, taking her hand. "You are awake, thank God. I thought," his voice broke, "I thought I had lost you." "Where are we?" "An inn. The carriage overturned. You were unconscious for 2 days. His grip on her hand was painful. "The doctor said there was nothing more to do but wait. I thought you might never wake." Alina looked at him, at the fear still written on his face, and felt something shift inside her. He had been afraid. He had been afraid of losing her. "Alexander," she said softly, "I am all right." He shook his head. "No, you are not. You are hurt because of me, because I did not insist on waiting out the storm." It was not your fault. It was. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. Everything that has hurt you in this marriage has been my fault. I have failed you from the very beginning. And now, he stopped, his voice choked. Alina reached up and touched his face. You have not failed me. I have. I pushed you away. I ignored you. I let you suffer alone. He turned his face into her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. And when I finally realized what I had, I almost lost you. You have not lost me. I am still here. He looked at her, and she saw the fear, the guilt, the desperate love in his eyes. Alina, he said, I cannot lose you. I do not know how to say it without sounding like a fool, but I cannot lose you. Then do not push me away again. I will not, I swear it. He leaned forward, his forehead touching hers. I will spend the rest of my life making you happy. I will never let you feel unwanted again. Alina closed her eyes, feeling his warmth, his breath, his nearness. I believe you. And she did. The confession came later, when they were finally home at Ashworth Manor. Alina was recovering in her chambers, her shoulder bandaged, her ribs still sore. Alexander had not left her side except when absolutely necessary. He brought her books and tea and sat with her for hours, reading aloud in his low, steady voice. One evening, as the fire crackled and the rain fell softly against the windows, he set down the book and took her hand. Alina, he said, there is something I need to tell you. She looked at him, her heart suddenly pounding. What is it? He was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Then he said, I loved someone once, before I married you. Alina's chest tightened. Honoria. No, he shook his head. Not Honoria. It was a woman I knew in London. Her name was Clara. She was married to a friend of mine, a man I respected. I never acted on my feelings, but they were there. Alina was silent, waiting. Clara died of a fever 5 years ago. I watched her die. I could do nothing to save her. His voice was low, raw. After that, I swore I would never love again. I closed myself off so I would never feel that kind of pain again. She understood then. All the distance, all the coldness. It was not about her. It was about a woman she had never known, a loss he had never grieved. I pushed you away because I was afraid, he said. I was afraid that if I loved you, I would lose you too. Alina reached for his hand. Alexander. Let me finish. He took a deep breath. I married you because I had to, because our families demanded it, and I resented you for it, even though you had done nothing wrong. She felt the sting of his words, but she did not look away. But somewhere in these months something changed. His voice softened. I watched you turn this house into a home. I watched you care for the tenants, for the servants, for everyone around you. I watched you smile at my brother, and I realized that I wanted you to smile at me. He paused, his eyes searching hers. I realized that I was in love with you, and I did not know how to tell you. I did not know how to undo all the hurt I had caused. Alina's eyes filled with tears. Alexander. I know I do not deserve your forgiveness. I know I have been cold and distant and cruel, but I am asking anyway. He squeezed her hand. I love you, Alina. I have loved you for longer than I can say, and I will love you for the rest of my life if you will let me. The words hung in the air between them. Alina looked at her husband, at the man who had broken her heart and was now offering her his own. She thought of all the lonely nights, all the unanswered letters, all the moments she had wanted to give up. And she thought of the horse fair, the silver brooch, the way he had held her hand in the carriage. She thought of the fear in his eyes when she woke in the inn, the way he had not left her side since. She thought of the man he was trying to become. I love you too, she whispered. Alexander's breath caught. What? I love you too. The tears were flowing now, but she was smiling. I have loved you since the moment I first saw you. Even when I tried to stop, I could not. He stared at her as if he could not believe what he was hearing. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, his face buried in her hair. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I am so sorry for all the time I wasted." "It does not matter now." She clung to him, feeling his heartbeat against her chest. "We have the rest of our lives." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining. "I do not deserve you." "Then become the man who does." It was the same challenge she had given him before, but this time she saw the determination in his eyes. "I will," he said. "I swear it." And in that moment, Alina knew that she had finally found what she had been waiting for. Not a perfect marriage, not a fairy tale romance, but something real, something true, something worth fighting for. She had found a love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. She had found her husband. The weeks that followed were the happiest Alina had ever known. Alexander kept his promise. He did not retreat to his study or disappear to London. He stayed at Ashworth Manor, walking with her in the garden, dining with her in the evening, talking with her long into the night. He told her about Clara, about the grief he had never fully processed, about the fear that had kept him prisoner for so long. She listened without judgment, holding his hand, offering comfort. And slowly, the last walls between them came down. They were not perfect. There were still moments of tension, old habits that died hard. But now, when Alexander felt himself pulling away, he caught himself. He remembered his promise. He chose love over fear. And Alina did the same. She stopped waiting for him to hurt her. She stopped guarding her heart. She allowed herself to trust, to hope, to love without reservation. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. It was everything she had ever wanted. One evening in late spring, they sat together on the terrace, watching the sun set over the gardens. The air was soft and warm, heavy with the scent of roses. "Thank you," Alexander said quietly. Alina looked at him. "For what?" "For not giving up on me." He turned to face her, his dark eyes serious. "For seeing something in me that I could not see in myself." She smiled. "I saw a man who was afraid, and I knew that beneath the fear there was someone worth loving." "You were right," he reached for her hand. "I was afraid, but you made me brave." They sat in silence, their fingers intertwined, watching the sky deepen from gold to pink to purple. "Alina," he said, "I have a confession." She felt a flicker of fear. "What is it?" He smiled, a genuine, open smile that transformed his face. "I am happy, truly, deeply happy, and it is all because of you." Alina's heart swelled. "I am happy too." "Good." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it. "Because I intend to make you happy for a very long time." They stayed on the terrace until the stars came out, wrapped in each other's warmth. And Alina knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she had finally found her home. Not Ashworth Manor, with its grand rooms and formal gardens. But Alexander, he was her home. And she was his. The news of Honoria's departure came a week later. She had returned to London, leaving a brief note thanking Alexander and Alina for their hospitality. There was no mention of her feelings, no acknowledgement of the tensions that had simmered beneath the surface. Alina felt only relief. She did not ask Alexander what had passed between them in those weeks. She did not need to know. She trusted him now in a way she had not thought possible. And Alexander gave her no reason to doubt. He was devoted to her, openly and unashamedly. He told her he loved her every morning and every night. He brought her flowers from the garden. He taught her to ride, patient and gentle, never once making her feel foolish. Christopher noticed the change and gave his brother a long, measured look. "I am glad," he said finally. "She deserves to be happy." Alexander nodded. "I know. I intend to make sure she is." Christopher clapped him on the shoulder. "Then I will hold you to that." It was the closest they had ever come to a true reconciliation, but it was enough. The summer brought new life to Ashworth Manor. The gardens bloomed in a riot of color. The tenants reported their best harvest in years. The village school was full of children, their laughter echoing through the streets. And Alina discovered that she was with child. She told Alexander on a warm August evening, as they sat in the garden watching fireflies dance in the twilight. "Alexander," she said softly, "there is something I need to tell you." He turned to her, his expression instantly alert. "What is it?" She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a child." For a moment, he simply stared at her. Then his face broke into the most beautiful smile she had ever seen. "A child," he repeated as if testing the word. "Our child." Yes, she was crying now, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Our child." He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Alina," he whispered, "you have given me everything, more than I ever deserved." "You gave me the same," she said. "You gave me a home, a family, a love I never thought I would find." They held each other until the fireflies faded and the stars came out. And Alina knew that whatever the future held, she would face it with Alexander by her side. The child was born in late winter, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's gray eyes. They named him Henry, after Alina's father. Alexander held his son for the first time with trembling hands, his face a mask of wonder. "He is perfect," he whispered. Alina, exhausted but radiant, smiled up at him. "He is. I will be a better father than my own was." Alexander's voice was fierce. "I will love him without reservation. I will never make him feel unwanted." "I know you will." Alina reached up to touch his face. "You are already a better man than you think you are." Alexander looked at her, his eyes bright with tears. "Because of you." "No," she said softly, "because of us." And it was true. They had built this life together, brick by brick, from the ashes of a broken beginning. They had faced pain and loneliness and fear, and they had emerged stronger. They had learned to love. And that love would carry them through the years to come, through the challenges and the joys, through the quiet mornings and the sleepless nights, through everything life would bring. As Alexander settled into the chair beside her bed, cradling their son, Alina closed her eyes and let herself rest. She was home. She was loved. She was finally completely at peace. The years passed. Henry grew from a babe in arms to a curious toddler, from a curious toddler to a serious young boy. He had his mother's intelligence and his father's quiet intensity, and he was the light of both their lives. Alexander proved to be the father he had promised to be. He read to Henry every night, taught him to ride, took him on long walks through the estate. He was patient and kind and present in a way his own father had never been. And he remained devoted to Alina. They had been married for nearly a decade now, but he still brought her flowers from the garden. He still told her he loved her every morning and every night. He still looked at her with the same wonder he had felt on the night of the horse fair. Alina had grown into her role as Duchess with grace and confidence. The estate flourished under her care. The village prospered. The people adored her. But she was not the same woman who had stood alone in the great hall on her wedding night, waiting for love that would never come. She was stronger now, wiser, more certain of her worth. She knew that she was loved. And that knowledge made all the difference. One evening, as they sat on the terrace watching Henry play in the garden, Alexander reached for her hand. "Alina," he said, "I have been thinking." "About what?" "About how different my life would be if I had not married you." His voice was quiet, reflective. "I would still be alone, still hiding from the world, still afraid to love." She squeezed his hand. "But you did marry me." "Yes, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me." He turned to face her, his eyes soft. "I know I did not choose you. I know our marriage was not what either of us wanted, but now I cannot imagine my life without you." Alina leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "Neither can I." They watched Henry chase a butterfly through the roses, his laughter bright in the evening air. "Thank you," Alexander said quietly. "For what?" "For loving me, for believing in me, for giving me a son." He paused. "For everything." Elinor smiled. "There is nothing to thank me for. Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done." He turned to look at her, and she saw in his eyes the same love that had grown between them over the years, steady and strong and unshakable. "I love you, Elinor Ashworth," he said. "And I love you, Alexander Ashworth." The sun set over the garden, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. And Elinor knew that she had finally found her happy ending. Not the one she had dreamed of as a girl, all romance and passion and grand gestures. But something better. Something real. A love that had been tested and had endured. A love that would last forever.